Have you ever poured your energy into someone only to realize that your help was wasted? There is wisdom in generosity, but also wisdom in knowing when to withhold it. Not all who ask for help seek transformation. Not all who suffer desire change, and not all who appear lost wish to be found. Let us consider the willfully ignorant, those who have no interest in truth. Their blindness is not due to the absence of light, but to their refusal to open their eyes. You may give them books, lessons, even your own experiences, but they will reject them all. A man who chooses ignorance over wisdom is like one who sits in darkness while cursing the sun. Beware the perpetual victim, those who have made suffering their identity. They are not seeking solutions, they are seeking sympathy. When given a ladder, they do not climb but complain that the steps are too high. They do not want to escape their struggle, for it has become their comfort. To help such a person is to trap yourself in their endless cycle of complaints. Then there is the entitled taker, the one who sees kindness as an obligation, not a gift. No matter what you give, it will never be enough. If you feed him today, he will demand a feast tomorrow. If you carry him across the river, he will expect you to walk him to his destination. Generosity must have boundaries, or it becomes slavery. Consider the chronic excuse maker, one who always finds reasons why change is impossible. You offer solutions, but they counter with problems. You show them a way forward, but they insist it is blocked. Such people do not seek help. They seek validation for their inaction. He who refuses to take a step must not blame the road for his stillness. Then there is the manipulative dependent, one who drains, deceives, and destroys. They take your time, your resources, your strength, yet never give anything in return. They thrive on your guilt, making you believe that abandoning them would be cruel, but true cruelty is enabling their endless dependence. There is a difference between helping and being used. Beware also the unrepentant betrayer, those who wound you, yet return, expecting kindness without change. They apologize not out of regret, but to regain your trust, only to shatter it again. Forgiveness is noble, but foolish is the man who embraces a snake and expects not to be bitten. There is the foolish rebel, one who resists wisdom not out of reason, but out of pride. You offer a lantern, but they choose to stumble in darkness. You warn them of the fire, but they run toward it, scorning your words. A man who refuses instruction does not lack guidance. He lacks humility. Helping others is a virtue, but misplaced help is a vice. To pour into a broken vessel is to waste the water. To open a door for one who refuses to enter is to labor in vain. And to carry a man who refuses to walk is to burden yourself without purpose. Give freely, but give wisely. Let your help be a tool for growth, not a crutch for stagnation. In doing so, you will not only preserve your strength, but also direct it toward those who truly seek the light. The willfully ignorant. There exists a type of person who does not lack knowledge because it is unavailable, but because they refuse to receive it. They are not lost due to a lack of direction, but because they close their eyes to the signs along the road. These individuals are not helpless, they are resistant. They reject wisdom not because it is beyond their grasp, but because they prefer the comfort of their own limitations. The willfully ignorant are those who, when presented with truth, dismiss it before they even consider its merit. They do not seek to understand, they seek to defend their existing beliefs, no matter how flawed. They are not interested in learning, but in protecting their illusions. If you tell them the fire is hot, they will argue that it is cold simply because they refuse to acknowledge your insight. You may prove to them the reality of a situation, but they will cover their ears and say, "I refuse to hear it." Helping such a person is like pouring water into a cup with no bottom. It does not matter how much wisdom, guidance, or knowledge you give them, it will never be retained. They will nod in agreement when you speak, but the moment you leave, they will return to their old ways as if the conversation never happened. They do not lack intelligence, they lack the will to change. The truth, no matter how plainly presented, cannot reach a heart that has been hardened against it. They often believe that their rejection of wisdom is a sign of independence. They view their ignorance as a form of strength, as if refusing to learn somehow proves their superiority. When corrected, they become defensive, sometimes even aggressive, as if admitting a mistake would shatter their entire identity. They are not merely uninformed, they are unwilling to be informed. To them, accepting truth is not an opportunity for growth, but an admission of weakness. One of the most frustrating aspects of dealing with the willfully ignorant is that they often create their own suffering. They walk into trouble that could have been avoided, yet when the consequences arrive, they blame the world rather than their own choices. They refuse to listen when warned about danger, but cry out in distress when they fall into it. They ignore wisdom when it is given freely, yet demand rescue when their own foolishness leads them to ruin. Even when confronted with undeniable evidence, they cling to falsehoods because they fear what accepting the truth might mean. If they admit they were wrong about one thing, they may have to question everything else they believe. This is too great a burden for them, so they reject the truth before it can challenge them. It is not knowledge they fear, it is the responsibility that comes with it. To know better means to be accountable, and accountability is a weight they are unwilling to carry. They will often surround themselves with those who reinforce their ignorance. They seek out voices that echo their own thoughts, ensuring that they are never confronted with opposing views. If wisdom enters their circle, they cast it out, labeling it as foolishness simply because it does not align with their desires. They do not wish to grow. They wish to be validated in their stagnation. The willfully ignorant will often mock those who seek knowledge. They laugh at wisdom, dismissing it as unnecessary or irrelevant. They see those who pursue understanding as wasting their time, unaware that their own refusal to learn is what keeps them trapped. They do not realize that their mockery is not a sign of superiority, but a defense mechanism to protect themselves from having to change. One of the greatest mistakes you can make is believing that if you just explain things clearly enough, they will finally understand. You may spend hours, days, or even years trying to guide them, thinking that if you are patient and kind, they will eventually see reason. But the willfully ignorant do not lack explanations, they lack willingness. They are not waiting for the right words, they are avoiding them. They do not reject wisdom because it is unclear, they reject it because it demands effort. Learning requires humility, and humility is something they refuse to embrace. To admit that they do not know is to admit that they have been wrong, and to be wrong is unacceptable to their pride. It is easier to remain in darkness than to acknowledge the light and be forced to change because of it. When you try to help the willfully ignorant, you will find yourself exhausted, frustrated, and disheartened. You will repeat the same lessons only to watch them be ignored. You will offer solutions only to hear endless excuses. You will give them knowledge only to watch them discard it the moment it challenges their comfort. The energy you spend on them will never bear fruit because their soil is not prepared to receive it. There is wisdom in knowing when to let someone be. Some people are not ready to learn, and no amount of effort on your part will change that. The willfully ignorant are not in need of more guidance. They are in need of a heart that desires truth. Until they choose to see, no amount of light will reach them. The perpetual victim. There are those who suffer, and then there are those who turn suffering into an identity. The perpetual victim is not simply someone who has experienced hardship. They are someone who refuses to move beyond it. Their struggles become their refuge, their excuse, and their shield. No matter how much help you offer, they will always find a reason why nothing can change. This type of person is addicted to sympathy. They crave the attention that comes from being seen as unfortunate, mistreated, or wronged. Their pain is their currency, and they spend it to buy concern, pity, and validation from others. They do not seek solutions, they seek listeners. The moment you suggest a way forward, they dismiss it, because to improve would mean losing the attention they have learned to depend on. When given an opportunity, they will find a flaw in it. When offered a helping hand, they will explain why it is not enough. When presented with a path to healing, they will insist that their wounds are too deep. They do not want to heal. They want to be seen as unhealable. Their suffering must remain unsolvable, for if it were solved, they would have to find a new way to define themselves. They will tell you that the world is unfair, that others are to blame, that they are always the unlucky one. But what they will not tell you is how often they have refused to take responsibility. They claim to be powerless, yet they reject every chance to reclaim their strength. They say they are trapped, yet they refuse to walk through open doors. The perpetual victim fears personal accountability more than they fear their own suffering. If they admit that they have some control over their circumstances, they must also admit that they have chosen not to act. It is far easier to believe that life has conspired against them than to acknowledge that they have played a role in their misfortune. To remain the victim is to remain free of responsibility. They surround themselves with those who will confirm their narrative. They seek out people who will nod in agreement when they complain, who will console them instead of challenge them, who will accept their excuses instead of dismantling them. They avoid those who push them toward change, for change threatens the comfort they have found in their own despair. Their conversations are filled with phrases like, "You don't understand what I've been through," or "It's easy for you to say," or "That won't work for someone like me." Every suggestion is met with resistance. Every encouragement is dismissed. They are not interested in overcoming their struggles. They are interested in proving why they never can. If you attempt to distance yourself from their endless cycle of complaints, they will accuse you of being heartless. If you refuse to engage in their pity-seeking, they will say you do not care. If you challenge their narrative, they will say you are victim-blaming. But the truth is, you cannot help someone who does not want help. You can only enable their stagnation. They will say they want happiness, but when given a path to it, they will reject it. They will say they want success, but when given the tools, they will find a reason why they cannot use them. They are not looking for escape, they are looking for affirmation that they are doomed. Their misery is their comfort zone, and anything that threatens it is seen as an attack. Over time you will realize that your words, your efforts, your concern, it all vanishes into an endless void. No matter how much you give, it will never be enough. They will take your energy, your time, your compassion, but they will never move forward. Helping them becomes an endless cycle of exhaustion, a loop that never breaks. The perpetual victim does not seek justice, they seek justification for remaining where they are. They do not seek a way out, they seek proof that the way out does not exist. They do not want to be empowered, they want to be pitied. And so long as they hold on to this mindset, no amount of guidance, support, or wisdom will ever make a difference. There are those who receive kindness with gratitude, and then there are those who believe kindness is something they are owed. The entitled taker is not merely someone in need, but someone who sees generosity as an obligation rather than a gift. They do not appreciate what is given to them, they expect it. No matter how much they receive, it is never enough. They believe that others exist to serve them. If you offer help once, they will assume you will always be there to provide. If you say yes today, they will be offended if you say no tomorrow. What was once a favor becomes a duty in their eyes. Your kindness is not seen as generosity, but as their rightful due. The entitled taker does not understand sacrifice because they have never had to make one. They demand, they take, and they move on without looking back. They never consider the cost of what they receive, nor do they care about the effort it took to provide it. The more you give, the less they appreciate. They are not grateful, they are expectant. Their words are filled with phrases like, "You should help me," or "That's the least you could do," or "If you really cared, you would do more." They manipulate through guilt, making you feel as if denying them is an act of cruelty. If you hesitate to give, they will remind you of everything they have suffered, using their misfortunes as a weapon to demand more from you. When confronted with rejection, they do not reflect on why they were denied. Instead, they become bitter, accusing others of selfishness. They believe the world is unfair, not because they lack opportunities, but because people will not endlessly provide for them. They see boundaries as betrayals and independence as abandonment. They do not ask, "How can I grow?" but rather, "Why is no one giving me more?" They do not seek self-improvement because they believe their needs are someone else's responsibility. To them, generosity is not an act of goodwill, but an expectation. They see no problem in taking endlessly, yet they will never consider giving in return. If they do something for you, it is not out of kindness, but as a strategy to obligate you. Their rare acts of giving always come with strings attached, always with an expectation of something greater in return. If you fail to repay their so-called generosity, they will accuse you of being ungrateful, even though they have spent their lives taking from others without a second thought. They do not seek relationships, they seek resources. They do not build friendships, they build dependencies. They attach themselves to those who are generous, kind-hearted, and giving, draining them slowly, bit by bit, until there is nothing left to take. Once their source of provision is depleted, they move on to the next, leaving behind only exhaustion and regret. The entitled taker resents those who have learned to say no. They will call them selfish, cold, or unkind, not realizing that true selfishness is in the endless taking without ever considering the giver. They will test your boundaries, pushing against them repeatedly, hoping you will break and return to giving. They do not respect limits, only persistence. When faced with consequences, they play the victim. If generosity is withdrawn, they do not ask why. They accuse the giver of betrayal. They see generosity as a river that must always flow, never considering that rivers can dry when overdrawn. If they are refused, they do not reflect on their own actions, but instead they blame the one who finally set a limit. They will say they are struggling, but they will never take action to change their circumstances. They will say they need help, but they will never help themselves. They do not seek solutions because that would require effort. They seek providers because that requires nothing. They do not want to be empowered. They want to be served. The more you give to an entitled taker, the less they respect you. They see generosity not as kindness, but as weakness. If you continue to provide, they will continue to demand. If you stop, they will call you cruel. No matter what you do, their hunger for more will never be satisfied. Their needs will grow with every act of kindness. What begins as a small favor will soon turn into an expectation. What was once gratitude turns into entitlement, and once they have drained you completely, they will leave without a second thought, seeking their next provider. The entitled taker will never change unless they are forced to. As long as someone is willing to give, they will continue to take. Their lesson comes not from receiving more, but from learning what it means to go without. Only when generosity is withdrawn will they ever begin to understand its value.